The tension had been building all week across the NASCAR garage. You could feel it in the air, that unmistakable electricity that precedes something explosive. Drivers moved through their routines, crews worked on their machines, but underneath the surface, something was shifting. This was not about lap times or pit stop adjustments. This was personal. And when things get personal in NASCAR, they never stay contained for long. Denny Hamlin sat behind the microphone on his podcast, Actions Detrimental, speaking with the kind of honesty that has made him one of the most outspoken voices in the sport. He was discussing Kyle Busch, the driver of the number 8 car for Richard Childress Racing, and he did not mince words. What he said was not designed to wound, but it landed hard nonetheless. Hamlin stated plainly what many fans and analysts had been whispering for years. Kyle Busch has been going through a rough stretch, not just recently, but for approximately 5 years now. He acknowledged the difficulty of the situation, offered a measure of empathy, but remained firm in his assessment. This is not working. Something has to change. Those words traveled fast. They moved through the NASCAR community like wildfire, spreading from podcasts to social media feeds to garage conversations. And when they reached Kyle Busch, they did not land softly. The two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion heard the criticism and responded with the intensity that has defined his entire career. His reaction was immediate, sharp, and unmistakably personal. Busch fired back without hesitation. If Denny Hamlin believes he can perform better, Busch declared, then he should come switch cars. Any day of the week, any track on the schedule. The challenge was direct, unfiltered, and carried the weight of wounded pride. But it was the next statement that truly ignited the situation. Kyle Busch said plainly that Denny Hamlin could have his life made hell. Those words hung in the air with undeniable gravity. This was no longer commentary. This was a promise. This was the kind of declaration that changes how drivers approach each other on the racetrack. Busch continued his response, dismissing the critics who questioned his abilities. He suggested that most people, approximately 80% by his estimation, simply do not understand what they are talking about. And he directed particular skepticism toward Hamlin himself, questioning whether the veteran driver truly possessed the insight to evaluate his situation. The message was clear. Kyle Busch was not accepting criticism from anyone, least of all a fellow competitor. The media seized upon every word. Headlines proliferated across every NASCAR platform. Fans immediately began choosing sides, debating the merits of each position with the passion that only stock car racing can inspire. What had begun as podcast commentary transformed into one of the most compelling storylines of the current NASCAR season. Denny Hamlin watched the response unfold and felt the weight of frustration settle over him. He turned to social media to defend his position, questioning what he was supposed to do in this situation. He hosts a podcast. The entire purpose of that platform is to discuss relevant topics within the sport. He asked directly where exactly he had crossed the line into bashing Kyle Busch. He felt he had been honest, perhaps blunt, but not malicious. Hamlin described his position as walking a tightrope. That phrase revealed the complexity of his situation. He was not backing away from his original statements, but he also had not anticipated this level of escalation. He stood by his analysis while acknowledging the precarious nature of public commentary between active competitors. Then Hamlin reinforced his original position with even greater clarity. If fans and observers expect Kyle Busch to suddenly return to his former dominance, they will be disappointed. Something fundamental needs to change, whether that involves the car, the setup, the approach, or some combination of factors that only the team can identify. He admitted freely that he does not have the answers. He is not Kyle Busch's crew chief. He is not his engineer. He is not his team owner. He is simply a driver competing in the same field who has observed the struggles and spoken honestly about what he sees. That honesty is precisely what triggered this entire confrontation. And now neither man shows any inclination to retreat. To understand the depth of Kyle Busch's reaction, you must understand the man himself. This is a two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. He has built his career on intensity, on confidence, on the absolute refusal to accept defeat or diminishment. His legacy in the sport is substantial and hard-earned. Every victory, every championship, every moment of dominance came through sheer competitive will. Now he finds himself at Richard Childress Racing during a period of significant struggle. The results have not matched expectations. The performance has not reflected the championship pedigree he brings to the organization. Fans have noticed. Critics have commented. The questions have multiplied with each passing week. So when Denny Hamlin made his statements on the podcast, Kyle Busch did not simply hear criticism. He heard doubt. He heard the suggestion that perhaps his best days are behind him, and for a competitor of his caliber, that suggestion is intolerable. His response reflected pure racer mentality. "If you believe you are qualified to criticize my performance or my team," Busch essentially declared, "then I respectfully but firmly disagree." That defiance has characterized his entire career. He does not bend. He does not break. He fights. Busch also emphasized a truth that applies to every driver who has ever strapped into a stock car. Every competitor experiences highs and lows throughout their career. The measure of a champion is not the absence of struggle, but the response to adversity. And Kyle Busch has chosen to fight through this difficult period rather than accept diminishment. This declaration transforms the entire situation. What began as commentary about performance has become something far more significant. This is now about narrative. This is about legacy. This is about a champion who feels the world is beginning to write him off and who refuses to accept that verdict. Meanwhile, Denny Hamlin remains equally committed to his position. One of the most outspoken personalities in the NASCAR garage has stated his assessment and shows no interest in apologizing for speaking his mind. Two immovable forces now face each other across the width of the racetrack. The implications of this confrontation extend far beyond words. You do not declare that you can make another driver's life hell and then proceed to race as if nothing happened. That statement carries weight. That statement carries consequences. When these two cars find themselves in proximity during a race, when positions are contested and bumpers make contact, the entire dynamic will be different. This is how rivalries are born in NASCAR. This is how tensions that simmer in the garage explode on the asphalt. Every fan who has followed the sport understands the pattern. Words lead to actions. Actions lead to consequences. And consequences reshape the competitive landscape. For the championship picture, these developments carry substantial significance. If Kyle Busch somehow channels this frustration and wounded pride into improved performance, he suddenly re-enters the conversation among contenders. Anger can be fuel. Criticism can be motivation. The very pressure that seems crushing can become the force that propels a driver forward. But the opposite outcome is equally possible. If the struggles continue, if the frustration leads to forced moves and revenge-focused racing, the situation could deteriorate further. The line between productive anger and destructive emotion is thin, and drivers walk it constantly. For Denny Hamlin, every move he makes around Kyle Busch will now receive intense scrutiny. Every pass, every bump, every moment of proximity will be analyzed through the lens of this confrontation. He has stepped into a spotlight that will not dim until this situation reaches some form of resolution. This is the kind of storyline that carries weight through the entire season. It follows drivers into the playoffs. It intensifies during the biggest races. It reaches its peak during those critical moments when emotions override calculation and drivers make decisions based on something deeper than strategy. The coming weeks will reveal how both men choose to handle this situation. Will they find a way to coexist professionally while maintaining their competitive edge? Will the tension escalate into on-track incidents that reshape the standings? Will one or both of them use this confrontation as motivation to elevate their performance? No one can predict the answers with certainty, but everyone watching NASCAR will be paying attention. The honest assessment of this situation reveals validity on both sides. Denny Hamlin did not say anything outrageous or unfounded. If you have watched NASCAR consistently over the past several years, you have observed the same patterns he described. Kyle Busch has not been the same dominant force that characterized his championship seasons. That observation is simply accurate. Hamlin stated it plainly, perhaps bluntly, but without malice. At the same time, Kyle Busch's response is entirely understandable. A two-time champion dealing with struggles at a team that has not provided the equipment to match his abilities finds himself subjected to public criticism from a fellow competitor. For someone with his competitive fire, even measured comments can feel like disrespect. Pride is a powerful force, and Busch has always possessed it in abundance. The concerning element is the threat of on-track retaliation. When a driver declares that he can make another driver's life hell, the statement moves beyond verbal sparring into territory that affects actual racing. NASCAR history is filled with examples of feuds that began with words and escalated into dangerous confrontations at 200 miles per hour. The potential for that outcome exists here. What appears to be happening is frustration manifesting on both sides. Hamlin wants to speak honestly about what he observes in the sport. Busch wants to defend his legacy and fight through a difficult period without accepting criticism he considers unfair. Neither position is unreasonable, but together they create combustible conditions. Paradoxically, this confrontation might ultimately help Kyle Busch. Sometimes drivers need that spark, that moment when competition becomes personal, to unlock performance they could not otherwise access. If he channels this anger constructively, the results could surprise everyone. But if revenge becomes his primary motivation, the consequences could make his situation significantly worse. This tension is precisely what makes NASCAR compelling viewing. The combination of competition, ego, pressure, and drivers who refuse to back down creates drama that no scriptwriter could fabricate. Kyle Busch is fighting to prove he remains elite. Denny Hamlin is standing by his honest assessment without apology. And somewhere on a racetrack in the near future, these two forces will collide. The situation between Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch feels like it has only just begun. What started as a simple comment on a podcast has evolved into a genuine rivalry moment. Busch fired back hard and made clear his willingness to respond on the track. Simultaneously, he is standing strong through the pressure at Richard Childress Racing, demonstrating that he will not accept criticism and still believes he can turn this season around. Now, the confrontation has transcended words. This is about pride. This is about performance. This is about what happens when two elite competitors line up against each other with unresolved tension between them. Anyone who has watched NASCAR for any significant period understands the pattern. Moments like this typically lead to something significant. The anticipation builds, the cameras focus, the world waits for the next chapter to unfold. The track will eventually provide answers that words cannot. The competition will reveal who backs down and who pushes forward. The results will speak with a clarity that podcast commentary and social media responses cannot match. Until then, the NASCAR community watches and waits. Two proud competitors stand on opposite sides of a divide that grows wider with each passing day. The stage is set for a confrontation that could define the remainder of this season. The next time these two cars find themselves in proximity, every fan watching will lean forward, knowing that what happens next could become part of NASCAR legend. This is racing at its most compelling. This is competition at its most personal. And this story is far from finished.